When the first rescue team finally broke through the snowstorm and reached the buried cabins, they were not welcomed with cheers. They were met with a terrifying silence. No smoke rose from the chimneys. No footprints marked the snow. But there was one thing that made the hardened mountains men vomit instantly. Smell. The unmistakable scent of meat being cooked in the midst of starvation. Inside the dark, freezing cabins, they found a scene that would haunt America forever. Human bones scattered like firewood. This is not a horror movie. This is the true story of families who set out to find paradise, but found a frozen hell instead. The question wasn't who died, but what did the survivors do to stay alive? This is the tragic story of the Donner Party. In the spring of 1846, the United States was gripped by migration fever. Thousands of people sold their homes, their farms, and their possessions in the East for one dream: California. Pamphlets spread across the country, promising fertile land, warm climates, and golden opportunities for anyone brave enough to cross the continent. Among these thousands were two wealthy families from Illinois who were close friends: the family of George Donner and the family of James Reed. They were not desperate, poor adventurers. They were respectable citizens carrying cash sewn into their quilts, optimistic that this journey would be the beginning of a new legacy. Their preparation was extravagant. The group, which would later be known as the Donner Party, carried abundant supplies. James Reed, the mastermind behind the trip, even built a massive two-story wagon equipped with an iron stove, soft beds, and comfortable seats for his sickly wife. It was nicknamed the Palace Car. The caravan set off with laughter and songs. Children played in the meadows, men hunted by day, and women cooked by night. To them, crossing America felt like a long vacation before starting a better life. But fate began to turn when they reached Fort Bridger. There, they heard about a new route called the Hastings Cutoff. Lansford Hastings, a famous guidebook author of the time, claimed his new path could shave 300 miles off the journey. For families traveling with many children and elderly members, the offer to arrive sooner was incredibly tempting. Although experienced mountain guides warned them to stick to the old, safe trail, James Reed and George Donner used their influence as leaders. They chose the shortcut. That was the first decision that sealed their doom. The moment their wagon wheels touched the Hastings route, they realized they had been lied to. It was not a road, it was a nightmare. The path went through narrow, rugged canyons and dense forests, never before touched by man. Instead of moving fast, the men had to chop down massive trees, move giant boulders, and level the ground every few yards just to let the wagons pass. Their progress slowed drastically. Sometimes, they moved only 1 or 2 miles a day. The enthusiasm that once burned bright began to be replaced by physical exhaustion and deep frustration. After fighting their way out of the forest, they faced the Great Salt Lake Desert. Hastings had promised the desert crossing would take 2 days. In reality, it took 6 full days of suffering under the scorching sun. Water ran out, their tongues swelled from dehydration. In the panic, many oxen and horses broke loose and ran into the desert, lost forever. When they finally found water on the other side, the group was broken. Wagons were damaged, food supplies were dangerously low, and worst of all, they realized that winter was coming fast, and they were still far from their destination. Mental stress began to claim victims. On the banks of the Humboldt River, a petty argument turned into a bloody tragedy. James Reed, stressed from losing his livestock, got into a fight with a young teamster named John Snyder. During the scuffle, Snyder struck Reed's wife with a whip. Blinded by rage, Reed drew his knife and stabbed Snyder in the chest. The young man died on the spot. The angry group wanted to hang Reed, but eventually decided to banish him into the wild without weapons or food. The leader was now an outcast, leaving his wife and children to struggle alone within the convoy. Without strong leadership, the group descended into chaos. They walked like the living dead. Disasters struck one after another. Local Native American tribes began stalking them at night, not to attack the humans, but to shoot their remaining cattle and horses with poison arrows. Dozens of animals died senselessly. reducing the meat rations they desperately needed for winter. Every morning, they woke up with fewer animals and greater fear. They were racing against time, trying to reach the mountain pass before the snow fell. De October 1846. They arrived at the foot of the Sierra Nevada mountains, the final fortress before California. The peaks were visible right in front of them. If they could cross them tomorrow, they would be safe in the warm Sacramento Valley. But that afternoon, the sky turned a dark gray. A cold wind began to blow, bringing the first flakes of ice. The group decided to rest for the night and cross in the morning. That was the second fatal mistake. That night, the snow did not stop. When they woke up the next morning, the road was gone, buried under 5 feet of white powder. The gates had closed. They were trapped. Retreat was impossible. Moving forward was suicide. The group split into 2 camps around Truckee Lake. They quickly built makeshift cabins from logs and animal hides, windowless, with freezing dirt floors. The blizzard raged for weeks, burying their cabins until only the roofs were visible. Inside that darkness, 87 souls, more than half of them children, huddled in the freezing cold. The remaining beef supply ran out. Starvation began to knock on the door. December arrived, and death began to collect its due. Desperate, a group of 15 of the strongest men and women decided to try walking through the storm to find help. They called themselves the Forlorn Hope. With meager supplies and fragile handmade snowshoes, they stepped into the white void. They did not know that this journey would take 33 days and become one of the most horrifying survival stories in human history. Meanwhile, at the main camp by the lake, conditions became severe. The beef was totally gone. They started boiling the ox hides that had been used as cabin roofs. They boiled old bones that the dogs had already chewed. When even that was gone, they boiled shoe leather and wagon straps just to feel something in their stomachs. Babies stopped crying because they had no energy left. One by one, family members began to die from malnutrition and hypothermia. The bodies could only be placed outside the cabins, buried in snow because the ground was too hard to dig. Back to the Forlorn Hope team. High in the mountains, they got lost and ran out of food. The storm trapped them without a fire. One by one, team members fell and froze to death. It was at this point that the boundary of humanity collapsed. The living looked at the bodies of their friends differently. Not as friends, but as the only way to survive. With tears in their eyes and shaking prayers, the first knife was drawn. They ate the flesh of their fellow travelers. It was the only fuel that allowed the survivors to reach the nearest village and raise the alarm. The snow has long melted from the Sierra Nevada mountains, but the chilling question of the donnerparty remains. We like to think we are civilized, but the line between a human and a wild animal is only 9 meals deep. So I leave you with this question. If you were trapped in that white hell, watching your loved ones starve, how far would you go to survive? If this documentary moved you, please hit the like button. It helps the algorithm share this history with the world. Do you think the survivors were heroes or monsters? Comment your honest opinion below. If you know someone who loves history, please share this video with them. And finally, to uncover more forgotten chapters of the United States, subscribe to the American Digital Library and turn on notifications. We are digging into the archives every week, and you don't want to miss what we find next. This is the American Digital Library, preserving the stories that others try to forget. I'll see you in the next chapter.